Hey everybody, Casey here with Life Abstract Gaming, and today I wanted to talk about the gaming industry. Since about the late 80s or early 90s, there's been an ongoing debate about which of the ever-changing game console manufacturers is the overall best. This is referred to as the console wars, and it's both really dumb and really fun to participate in.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo.
Today, I'm not going to go through a whole history of the various console wars that have gone on in the past. Rather, I want to discuss the very interesting state of the current generation we're in. It's been pretty standard in the last couple of console generations that after a few years in, manufacturers make design improvements or slim versions or even just color variations in order to refine the product and bring down costs as well as to boost sales. This current generation has actually been a little strange for two reasons. The first is that Nintendo, who's been a longtime industry leader, was so far out of the discussion that they launched a new console, the Switch, with no update or iteration on the previous console, the Wii U. This is actually pretty similar to the original Xbox, which was doing so poorly in comparison to Sony and Nintendo at the time. Microsoft essentially cut their losses and moved on to the Xbox 360, which ended up being a great call. Nintendo is essentially doing the same thing here. The second oddity this generation is that Microsoft, after unveiling their updated console, the Xbox One S, are also planning on releasing a more powerful console codenamed Scorpio. They maintain that this is not a next console, but more of a half step, and will still play Xbox One games from the current generation, so no Scorpio specific titles. The most similar instance of something like this ever happening before that I can think of was with the Nintendo 64 and the expansion pack. That thing upped the RAM of the vanilla N64 and allowed bigger games to function like Donkey Kong 64 and Perfect Dark. But in this instance, the games wouldn't work properly without the expansion pack. You get a very limited, scaled down version instead. Microsoft, however, says that everything released for Xbox One will run fine on any version of the console. There will just be certain benefits afforded to those who are using the stronger machine. So while Nintendo and Microsoft appear to be shaking things up, Sony's pretty much held fast to tradition. They launched the PS4 in 2013, and 4 years later they introduced the PS4 Pro, which has some new features but is more in line with a console update and less like a half step towards the next generation like Microsoft is touting. Makes a lot of sense though. Sony came into this generation in second place and immediately stole the top spot from Microsoft when their new systems both launched. Only recently has Microsoft been able to match or surpass the number of consoles sold by Sony monthly, but the year and a half of superior sales Sony had puts them in a comfortable lead in terms of install base. For Nintendo, the reasons behind their new launch are simple. The Wii U was a failure. By comparison, the original Wii sold 101.6 million units. Even if you chalk those numbers up to the motion control fad that swept the country, the Nintendo DS, their handheld device, sold 154 million units. If you want to say, okay, well that's a handheld, the GameCube, which was itself considered a failure, sold 21.7 million units. If you plug in the N64, which sold 32.9 million units, you can clearly see that Nintendo has been on a downtrend, which gets offset by the Wii phenomenon and their handheld market. This makes it very clear why the Switch exists and why it had to come out so quickly. Nintendo made a console with motion controls that can act as a handheld. I feel as though Microsoft has a different motivation for their move, that motivation being VR. If you follow the history of Microsoft, you see a company that is extremely quick to adapt to the market. When both the PS4 and Xbox One launched, VR was still just an upcoming technology that definitely showed promise but hadn't proven itself as viable in gaming just yet. I'd like to say that it still hasn't, but it's clear that it's going to try very hard to do so. Sony sought to move into the space and develop PlayStation VR, which is their own proprietary hardware to work with the PS4. Their headset is the cheapest and least powerful of the current big-named headset manufacturers, which are Valve's HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift. Microsoft opted not to build their own VR hardware, but instead built a console powerful enough to make use of one of the ones already existing, the Oculus Rift. Microsoft hasn't announced any official partnerships, but head of Xbox Phil Spencer has stated on IGN's Xbox podcast Unlocked that they would be open to it. I fully expect support for Oculus on the Scorpio to be announced near or during E3 of this year. This generation's console war is probably the best I've seen since the big Nintendo versus Sega battles that coined the term back in the 90s. It's fun to watch big companies take little jabs at their competition, and it's even more interesting to watch how the actions one company takes ripples throughout the industry and gives us consumers the most innovative tech in games we've ever seen. Aside from playing them, this is probably my favorite thing about video games. So, who are you rooting for in this generation's console war? Do you think Nintendo can make up any ground against Microsoft and Sony with the Switch, or do you think Sony's slow and steady strategy will hold out against Microsoft's console shakeup? Let us know. We're listening. Bonus message. Just want to remind you guys to please like our videos and our Facebook page. If you're not already subscribed, please do so on our YouTube channel. Also, if you missed the first Super Barbros party, in April, you're in luck because Super Barbros 2 is happening on May 27th. Please check the Facebook page for more details. Thanks.